She thought the rules didn't apply to her, a private pool, a retired black officer, and a trespassing neighbor who just wouldn't stop. But when Karen crossed the line one last time, she never expected what happened next. This isn't just a story about boundaries, it's about respect, accountability, and a man who finally said, enough. In the outskirts of a quiet suburb in Georgia, the birds chirped gently, the breeze whispered through the magnolias, and the pool in Marcus Ellison's backyard shimmered under the summer sun. Marcus, a retired black police officer with 22 years of service behind him, had finally bought his dream home, a spacious property with a private backyard oasis, complete with a saltwater pool and a stone grill he built himself. It was his sanctuary, a place of peace, or at least it was supposed to be. That all changed when she moved in next door. Her name was Karen Whitmore, blonde, mid-50s, entitled attitude, and armed with a fox smile that masked years of practiced condescension. She was the self-appointed neighborhood monitor of their cul-de-sac, and from the moment Marcus moved in, Karen had made it her mission to remind him subtly or otherwise that she didn't think he belonged. It started small, passive-aggressive notes in his mailbox about his lawn, complaints about too many guests during his niece's graduation party, even though he'd followed all HOA rules, and then, the final straw, she began sneaking into his backyard and using his pool when he wasn't home. The first time, Marcus thought maybe he was mistaken. The second time, his backyard cameras confirmed it. And the third time, that's when he decided enough was enough. It was a sweltering Friday afternoon. Marcus pulled into his driveway after a trip to the store, groceries in hand, but something caught his eye, the faint sound of splashing. He narrowed his eyes, opened his side gate, and sure enough, there she was, Karen, reclining on one of his lounge chairs in his swimsuit. Yes, she'd taken it from his outdoor storage bin, sipping a can of LaCroix like she owned the place. Oh, she gasped when she saw him. Marcus, I didn't think you'd be home so soon. I just needed a quick dip. You know how hot it gets. Marcus stood there in silence. He set his bags down. He looked at her, and for a moment, just nodded. All right, he said, calmly. Have your swim. Karen blinked. Oh, really? Well, thank you. I knew you'd understand. He went inside. She thought she'd won. What she didn't see was Marcus pulling out his phone and making a quiet call. Not to the police, he was the police, or used to be. Instead, he called someone more effective. 2 hours later, Karen was still lounging by the pool, soaking up the sun like it was her God-given right. That's when the black SUV pulled up. Out stepped two officers in plain clothes. Ma'am, one of them said, flashing his badge, we need you to get dressed and come with us. Karen sputtered. What? Why? I'm not doing anything wrong. You're trespassing, and we have video evidence, as well as a signed affidavit from the property owner. She turned to Marcus, now standing behind them with folded arms. You're calling the police on me? Are you serious? After everything I've done to keep this neighborhood safe? Marcus chuckled. Karen, I am the police, or was, and I've had just about enough of you. That's when Karen snapped. She launched into a tirade how she'd just borrowed the pool, how he owed her for being tolerant, how she had influence with the HOA and city council. Big mistake. Because what Karen didn't know was that Marcus had already met with the HOA and had shared all the footage. Turns out, she'd violated multiple property laws. And this wasn't her first time crossing boundaries with other neighbors either. The HOA was already preparing to fine her. But now, with official police involvement, things were about to get serious. The story exploded locally. A retired black officer calling out a privileged neighbor for trespassing wasn't just ironic, it was cathartic. Karen was charged with trespassing and harassment. Her HOA fines reached into the thousands. She was forced to write a public apology. Marcus graciously rejected, and she eventually sold her house and moved away. Marcus? He got his peace back, and every morning, as he sipped his coffee by the pool, he'd smile at the new no trespassing sign mounted by the gate. Just beneath it, a second sign read, Retired officer lives here. Trespass at your own risk. Karen's departure didn't happen overnight. After that initial confrontation and arrest, she was released on bail within hours, angry, humiliated, and louder than ever. The very next morning, Marcus received a knock at his door. It was a woman from the HOA board, Mrs. Delaney, holding a stack of printouts. Her voice trembled with both nerves and vindication. "Mr. Ellison," she said, "we've received multiple complaints about your neighbor even before you moved in, but we never had solid proof until your security footage." Marcus invited her in, reviewed the footage with her and 2 other board members, and laid out a timeline of Karen's trespassing, her entitled rants, and even footage of her digging through his pool storage for supplies. By the time they left, the HOA had launched a formal investigation. Within the week, Karen received notice of a $6,000 fine, plus an official warning that a repeat violation would result in legal action and community expulsion. Karen, true to form, threw a tantrum. She began posting on the community Facebook page, ranting about how she was being targeted. "I was just cooling off. What happened to neighborly kindness?" she wrote. But the comments turned on her quickly. One neighbor replied, "Neighborly kindness doesn't include stealing swimsuits and trespassing, Karen." Another, "We all saw the footage. You've harassed Marcus since day one." And the final blow came when Marcus uploaded a clip of Karen shouting, "People like you don't belong here," followed by her scrambling out of the pool when the undercover officers arrived. That clip went viral. Within days, the story was picked up by a local news outlet under the headline, "Retired Black Officer Stands His Ground Against Entitled Neighbor," and the neighborhood cheers. Marcus was contacted by community leaders who praised his restraint, grace, and professionalism. One even asked him to speak at a town hall meeting about neighborhood accountability and race relations. He agreed, and what he said brought the room to complete silence. "For 22 years, I protected this country and the people in it, regardless of who they were. I never judged. But the moment I move into a quiet neighborhood to retire in peace, someone decides I'm the threat. That tells me there's still work to do." Karen, watching the speech from her living room through gritted teeth, knew the tide had turned. 2 months later, a "for sale" sign went up in her yard. She didn't even tell anyone she was leaving. She simply packed, posted one last bitter goodbye online blaming cancel culture, and disappeared from the community she once tried to dominate. Marcus didn't celebrate outwardly. He didn't have to. Instead, he hosted a small barbecue, inviting neighbors black, white, Hispanic, old and young into his backyard, the same backyard Karen once tried to claim for herself. As kids splashed in the pool and the scent of smoked ribs filled the air, one of the newer neighbors approached him with a smile. "You changed the vibe of this whole street, Marcus," she said. "It feels like a real neighborhood now." He raised his glass. "Takes a village," and some video surveillance. Everyone laughed. Weeks later, Marcus received a handwritten letter, no return address. It simply read, "I watched the video again. I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know I was wrong." Marcus folded the letter, placed it in a small box of mementos from his police career, and set it on a shelf in the den. Not because he needed the apology, but because it was a reminder dignity, when guarded with strength and patience, always wins in the end. 3 months after Karen's quiet departure, life in the neighborhood had completely shifted. What was once a cul-de-sac laced with tension and whispered judgments was now filled with block parties, shared laughter, and a rare thing in suburbia, actual community. And Marcus Ellison had unintentionally become the heart of it. Neighbors who had once waved politely from behind their curtains now stopped by with baked goods, tools to share, or simply to chat. It wasn't just about Karen, it was about the silent permission her behavior had once given others. Now that she was gone, and Marcus had stood his ground with class, courage, and undeniable facts, those walls crumbled. But Marcus wasn't naive. He knew that for every Karen who gets caught, there were others who watched quietly, waiting to see how the world would respond. So, he stayed involved. He began holding monthly community watch and grill nights, informal meetups in his backyard where neighbors brought their own folding chairs and stories. They discussed safety, neighborhood improvements, and how to respectfully handle disputes before they became headlines. One evening, a young black couple moving into a nearby unit joined the gathering. As they nervously introduced themselves, Marcus offered them a plate of ribs and a seat near the fire pit. "You're welcome here," he said simply. They looked around at the diverse crowd laughing, swapping recipes, and talking about property taxes like old friends. "We can tell," the woman whispered. Not long after, Marcus received a letter from the city mayor. It included an official invitation to join the Community Mediation Task Force, a new initiative focused on preventing neighborhood disputes from escalating to the level Marcus had endured. His reputation was growing, and not as a man who fought back with anger, but as one who led with wisdom and action. Meanwhile, back in her new city 2 states away, Karen was struggling. Word had followed her. Background checks from her HOA violations, the viral video still circulating, and news of her outburst at the town hall meeting all made it difficult to assimilate. She had hoped to start fresh, but every time she smiled too wide or complained too loud, someone remembered her face. In an ironic twist, she found herself on the receiving end of subtle exclusion. People avoided her. Conversations stopped when she walked into the room. Her own tactics had turned on her. And though Marcus never knew the full extent of her downfall, he didn't need to. Justice didn't always arrive in courtrooms. Sometimes it came in the form of growth, a community transformed, a neighborhood healed. One warm autumn afternoon, Marcus sat on his porch polishing the badge he'd retired with. His niece, now a college freshman majoring in criminal justice, called him from her dorm. "Uncle Marcus, remember when you told me dignity always has a longer reach than pride?" He smiled. "Sure do. Why?" "Because I just saw your story used in my ethics class. They made us watch that video," my professor said. "This is how you confront injustice without becoming part of it." Marcus laughed softly, a proud tear forming. "Well, I guess I made the syllabus." As the sun dipped low behind the trees, he leaned back in his chair. The sound of sprinklers ticked on. A few kids biked past, waving as they headed home for dinner. The neighborhood was calm, whole, and on the gate to his backyard still hung the small wooden sign, "Retired officer lives here. Respect goes both ways." It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a statement of peace earned and peace kept. Months passed. Winter came and went, and by the time spring rolled in, Marcus's backyard had become a symbol not just of peace, but of how one man's steady hand could steer a whole community back to decency. But just when things felt fully settled, an unexpected knock came at Marcus's door. It was a Saturday morning, and he was halfway through fixing the hinges on his front gate when he saw the figure standing on the porch. A tall, awkward young man in a rumpled suit, holding a small manila envelope and glancing nervously at the doorbell cam. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked, walking over, wiping his hands on a rag. The young man turned. "Mr. Ellison, my name's Adam Whitmore. I'm Karen's son." The name hit the air like a dropped dish. Marcus crossed his arms. "Go on. I know my mom was out of line. What she did, it was wrong. She's paying for it now. She's miserable, isolated, and blames everyone but herself. But that's not why I'm here." He held out the envelope. "I found this in her things after she had a bit of a breakdown. It's a letter she wrote to you, handwritten, but she never sent it. I think maybe she was too ashamed. I don't know if it makes anything better, but I thought you should have it." Marcus took the envelope slowly. "Why are you doing this?" Adam hesitated, then said, "Because I was raised better than what I saw her become. And because she didn't just wrong you, she taught me wrong, too." It took seeing her crash and burn to understand how dangerous that mindset is. Marcus studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "You want a glass of tea?" Adam looked surprised. "You're offering me tea?" "I'm offering you a second chance. Something your mother never gave me." They sat on the back porch under the shade of the patio. Adam sipped quietly while Marcus opened the letter. It read, "Marcus, I don't expect you to forgive me. I was wrong. I see it now. I saw a strong black man next door, and instead of being proud or welcoming, I felt threatened. But it was never about you. It was about what I feared, losing control, comfort, identity. The truth is, you did nothing but move in and live with dignity, and I couldn't handle that. I'm sorry. I wish I had your strength." Karen. Marcus read it twice, then folded it gently and slipped it into the same wooden box where he kept her first apology letter. When Adam left later that day, Marcus walked him to the curb. "You're welcome here," he said. "Not because of who your mother was, but because of who you choose to be." That summer, Marcus was named the official chair of the city's Community Mediation Board. He gave talks at high schools, was invited onto local radio, and even got a feature in Southern Living titled "The Porch That Changed a Neighborhood." At one community meeting, a young boy raised his hand and asked, "Mr. Ellison, how did you stay so calm when that lady kept doing bad stuff to you?" Marcus smiled, knelt beside him, and said, "Because when you're standing in truth, you don't need to raise your voice, you just need to hold your ground." And so the man who once just wanted peace in his backyard became a quiet legend in his city. Not because he shouted, but because he didn't have to dot by the time fall arrived again. Marcus Ellison's name carried weight not just in the neighborhood, but across the city. He was no longer just the retired black officer who stood up to a Karen. He was a mentor, a local leader, and quietly a symbol of how to handle injustice with quiet power. But the most meaningful moments came not from public recognition, but the quiet ones. One October evening, during his usual walk through the neighborhood, Marcus heard a familiar sound: laughter from the front yard of a home 2 streets over. A group of kids were playing tag under string lights, while their parents shared drinks on folding chairs. As Marcus passed, a woman waved him over. "Mr. Ellison, want to join us?" It was a neighbor he barely knew, yet here she was offering him a chair, a plate, and a space like they'd been friends for years. That kind of easy trust wasn't common, but now it was becoming the new normal. He smiled. "I'll grab my ribs from home and be right back." And so, the man who once built high fences to protect his peace was now welcomed into backyards, porches, and Sunday dinners across the community. He mentored teens who had brushes with the law, often inviting them to help him with small projects: fixing a gate, planting herbs, sanding wood, always turning each moment into a life lesson. "Respect isn't something you demand," he'd say. "It's something you demonstrate, consistently," and they listened. Because Marcus didn't preach, he lived it. Then came the invitation that stunned him, a nomination for the state community peacekeeper, a word and honor usually reserved for sitting officers or nonprofit leaders. The governor's office called personally. "You've done something special, Mr. Ellison. You changed a community without a badge, without force, without even raising your voice. That's rare, and it matters." Marcus chuckled on the phone. "Well, I always figured if you do the right thing long enough, someone's bound to notice." He accepted, but not for the spotlight. He accepted for the message that integrity, when lived out loud, doesn't just survive conflict, it transforms it. The night of the award ceremony, Marcus stood at the podium in a modest navy suit. No fanfare, no entourage, just him, a few family members, and a room full of strangers waiting to hear from a man who had become a quiet hero. He began, "I never asked to become a story. I just wanted to swim in my pool without being accused of trespassing on my own land. But life doesn't always let us pick how we teach people. Sometimes we become the lesson. My only hope is that what happened in my backyard ripples far beyond the fence. Because peace isn't passive, it's built, maintained, protected. And anyone, yes, anyone can be a peacekeeper." The standing ovation that followed wasn't loud just for him. It was loud for every person who'd ever stayed silent under pressure, for everyone who'd been judged by skin before seen for substance. And back home that night, as Marcus placed the award on the mantel, he looked out the window and saw something that made him smile. A new family, just moving in down the street, young, black, nervous. He grabbed 2 cold drinks from the fridge and headed their way. In a world where fences often divide and fear fuels prejudice, one man's pool became a battleground, and then a bridge, and all because Marcus Ellison chose patience over rage, respect over retaliation, and community over chaos. Winter settled into the city once more, slow, soft, and silent. But inside Marcus Ellison's home, things were full of motion and warmth. He wasn't just a retired officer anymore. He was Coach Marcus at the local youth center, mentoring boys from troubled homes. He was Mr. Ellison to a group of elderly neighbors he routinely helped with grocery runs, light bulb changes, or navigating the internet. and too many others. He had simply become the guy you go to when something needs fixing, whether it was a fence, a misunderstanding, or a broken sense of belonging. But despite the growing legacy, Marcus stayed humble. Every morning, he still swept his porch, still brewed the same pot of black coffee, still fed the stray orange cat that had adopted his backyard as a kingdom, and still sat quietly with his thoughts until one day, something unexpected arrived. It was a small white envelope, hand-addressed, no return address, the postmarked a small town in Tennessee. Inside, a letter, this one not from Karen, but from someone who had seen the viral clip over a year ago and had tracked him down the old-fashioned way. Dear Mr. Ellison, I am a white man in my 60s. I've lived most of my life thinking racism was overblown, that people just needed to let things go. But your story made me sit down and listen, not react, not defend, just listen. For the first time in my life, I realized how much I've ignored, not because I was hateful, but because I was comfortable. You shook that comfort in the best way possible. Thank you for showing the world what strength really looks like. James M. Oak Ridge, TN. Marcus stared at the letter for a long time. Then he quietly folded it, placed it beside the others in the wooden box, and closed the lid with reverence. That week, a local high school invited him to speak for Black History Month. They asked him to talk about famous civil rights figures, but he offered something different. I could talk about heroes, he said. But what if you are the hero your neighborhood is waiting for? What if all it takes is staying calm when the world gets loud, and standing firm when you're pushed to shrink? Students lined up afterward not just to thank him, but to hug him. Some said they'd heard their parents talk about that guy with the pool. Now they understood why it mattered. In the spring, the city council voted unanimously to rename the small park at the end of Marcus's street. The new name, Ellison Commons. The plaque read, in honor of Marcus Ellison, who reminded us that peace, when held with dignity, becomes contagious. He stood quietly at the unveiling ceremony, tears forming despite his best efforts. Kids ran past him on the playground. Parents clapped. Reporters snapped photos. But he didn't make a speech. He just nodded. Because sometimes the loudest legacy is lived, not spoken. And on quiet evenings, when the sun fell low and the cicadas began their summer songs, Marcus still sat by the edge of his pool. Not guarding it anymore, not defending it. Just enjoying it. Because finally it was his, fully, uninterrupted, respected. And that, above all, was the justice he had earned. As time moved on, Marcus Ellison's story faded from headlines, but not from hearts. The quiet strength he showed didn't just change a neighborhood. It challenged a culture. He never sought revenge, never raised his voice. He didn't post angry videos or seek sympathy. He simply stood his ground with integrity, patience, and the truth on his side. And that made all the difference. To the Karens of the world, know that the age of unchecked entitlement is coming to an end. To those silently enduring injustice, know that you don't need to shout to be powerful. Sometimes the calmest man in the room holds the greatest fire. And to every person watching this, remember, respect isn't given because of fear or status. It's earned and returned through how we treat each other, even when no one's watching. Because fences may keep people out, but dignity, it invites people in. Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more powerful true stories that inspire, confront, and awaken. Got a story like this? Share it in the comments. We might feature it next. Stay strong, stay true, and never let anyone take your peace.